foul language. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome, everyone, to Rising Out of the Chrysalis, Stories That Inspire with Marisa Grace, where we share life stories of struggle and triumph, not only of my own life experiences, but also through the experiences of my guests, as a way to help you have breakthroughs and find hope in your own life. I'm Marisa Grace, and today I have a special guest, Ethan Nicholas, who has an amazing, inspiring story to share with all of us. So welcome, Ethan. I'm so happy that you're here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So Ethan, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do, and tell us this amazing story of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ethan Nicholas. I am a childhood trauma survivor. I am currently a personal trainer, public speaker. I wrote a book trying to get that published. I advocate and do a lot of work for how we view mental health and how we treat it. And yeah, I'm here today to tell you a bit about my story and how I got to this place that I am now as an advocate and as a world changer. And I will start by telling you that I was in therapy yesterday and talking about this thing with my therapist about knowing and understanding suffering better than most people. And I used to say it as a brag because it was a mark of honor, like a badge of honor, to be able to carry what I carried throughout my life without really ever understanding what it was. I try to quantify my suffering for people, in reference to my childhood trauma and suffering abuse, and thinking that it went on for a decade. And I tell people that, and a decade is kind of a tangible, finite thing. It's 10 years, but it's not something we kind of we speak about often. We know a year is 365 days, and it's long, it can be cold, it's hot, it's dry, we go through shit in a year. But 10 is not quite it. But when I say I experienced 3,000 offenses on my body, mind, and soul, like, that's tangible. That's kind of gross in a way. And it's really, honoring for me, the fact that that's a true statement about my life. My story starts so early at 5 years old, remembering cuddling with a parent. And that should be normal, and it is. And I'm going to stop real quick and just give my own trigger warning that I'm about to talk about sexual abuse of children. And cuddling is a normal thing, and I never clocked any different. I was 5 years old. I was learning everything I needed to know about life at that time, what was appropriate, right from wrong. And the cuddling soon turned into more than cuddling. At the time, it didn't even register with me. Honestly, it's hard to think that it went on for so long, because I just never got the chance to know different. From the get-go, all I knew was to get love, I had to be physical with my body. I was basically in a relationship with a parent for 10 years of my life, 5 to 15. Throughout that time, yeah, like, I acted out. I showed people that something was wrong, even though I may not have been able to communicate it with my mouth and with my words, because I didn't have the understanding that I needed to. But I was caught in school doing bad things or wrong things, and nobody stopped it. Nobody thought to ask what was going on. Going into my teen years and just shifting into a horrifically angry person. Nobody clocked that I had changed. I was really kind. I was a bit of a pushover my whole life going through this thing. I was under severe punishment for acting out all the time. If I went home and had anything less than a B, it was an ass beating. I remember seeing my abuser pick my little brother up and by his ankle and spank him in midair before school one day. Like, the things that I've seen in my lifetime all equated to making me hate the world, and I was okay with hating it. It wasn't until I was put into cadets that something shifted. I got to go away for the summer, which was really cool because I was away from the abuse. It was a time just to be free and to be me. But even in that, all I was doing was acting out. I got caught fighting all the time. I was stealing. I was the problem solver on the military base they had us on. I remember throwing a kid out of a window because he threatened my little brother when he was there. If you had a problem, I could solve it, especially when it came to things like race or kids being bullied. Like, I hated it. I've always hated injustice. I just didn't know what it was going to be used for at the time. But I knew I could use my fists because I tried and I wanted to. I wanted to hurt people. I lived in that state for so long. And because of that cadet camp, when I hurt that kid, somebody finally pulled me to the side and asked me if I was okay. And that is literally what it took. I still know this person. We still talk from time to time. So I'm just going to change it. I can see that's hitting me in the face funny. I don't know where to sit for this. I'm going to change this.
That's good. You're good. Yeah.
There we go. I still talk to her to this day, but she literally just pulled me aside and said, "What's going on? Nobody should be this angry." And that's all it took. Right there in that moment, I told this person everything that was going on in my life, and she had the legal obligation to put it to the proper authorities. And I was removed from my home. My brother was removed from the home while the investigation went on, and eventually wound up putting my abuser in jail. The moment the fear of being hurt was gone, I went off the deep end. I started running away from home. I started really becoming violent, stopped going to school, got caught up in an ecstasy addiction, and just was looking for any reason to escape. And if I couldn't escape, I wanted to hurt people. People deserve to hurt. You can't go through life hurting people and not expect that somebody's going to come along and hurt you. And that was the person that I crafted myself to be. I wanted to hurt people that were hurting people. I made a name for myself being that person, the protector, the one you could call to solve problems. And I loved it. From the bottom of everything I remember, I loved being that person. I still do. It's the core of my being and what makes me the man I am. The only caveat to that is I had no healthy way of expressing that. And so it was unhealthy. It was toxic. It was gross. It was just, I was on a warpath. And if you got in my way, it was your own fault.
And that totally makes sense because, you're angry. There was no way of expressing the hurt that you're feeling inside. And I could totally understand the pain that you're going through. Myself experienced sexual abuse, and it started before the age of 5. I can't even remember. I have a vague memory of the first incident, and it's always, for the majority of part, it's always somebody, a family member or a neighbor, like somebody that's close to the family. And I had multiple different abusers, and just like you, like nobody understood there was something wrong with me. I didn't become a rebel like you did. You were expressing your emotions outwardly. I internalized them, which was probably one of the worst things that one can do, and became very depressed because I had no way of expressing the emotion. And one of the reasons for that was, in addition to experiencing that, I had a dad that was an alcoholic and physical and verbally abusive, who would threaten us if we spoke out, if we raised our voice. So very early on, I was told I couldn't speak up. I couldn't speak up or say anything. So I shut down. And it makes sense that you were expressing that anger, that, okay, people deserve to be hurt as much as I did. You know, is it okay that somebody can hurt me as bad as they did? And they also deserve the same punishment if they do something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the thinking that we have back then, because we're hurting as we're going through the process, and we try to make sense of it, right? And justify it that, okay, if they were allowed to hurt me as bad as, you know, they did, then it's okay for me to do the same. Like somebody else should feel that same pain.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I always question the fact, like, will they ever feel my pain? Like my pain was so severe, like, and I used to just kind of, you know, pray to God and say, you know, hey, this isn't fair. How come can somebody inflict so much pain on me? How do I know? Like, where's the payback? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that they're going to feel the same pain. You know, it's not about punishing them, putting them in jail. Is, will they ever feel the pain that they inflicted
Mm-hmm.
in my whole life? Because it's not like a one incident thing, like, oh, somebody pushed me and punched me and I got over that punch. The pain
Mm-hmm.
is gone. The pain is there forever.
Yeah.
It stays with you. And so emotionally, what were like emotions that you're going through inside, that how did it affect you?
Uh, you know, I just remember honestly just so much hatred, so much anger, and just real rage. It I loved being angry. It was the only thing I knew. And everyone always told me that like being angry was wrong and I wasn't allowed to express the emotion, but like no one taught me how to express it in the first place. You know, I've been a chameleon my entire life, you know, up until I started healing and realizing that I didn't need to change to fit an environment. I had to change the environment, you know, but I've never had my own identity. I wrote one of my first blog pieces about it when I started this work. And they said like I learned everything I knew about life came from movies or TV. You know, I had a completely dysfunctional family, and I never, though I may never have like clocked it, I my favorite things were revenge movies. Like from early on, I always loved revenge and justice movies where people got their comeuppance in the end. You know, it's I've always been that way. And so I framed who I was around things that I was seeing around me or pieces that I would like about a character or, you know, whatever, and just kept acting out life. And I remember emotions, but they were never really mine. You know, the emotion that I remember the most is empty, is
Mm-hmm.
loneliness, is, you know, so many times just wondering like why me? Why, you know, before I started healing, it was always me. Like, why was I always the one getting into fights? Why was I always the one in the place that something bad was happening? Why was I always the one that had to be in circumference of something else happening and me having the ability to get involved and me as the person knowing that I'm going to be involved? Like I just it's wild to look back and, you know, realize how much of your life was bullshit and remember that, you know, a lot of who you are was bullshit too, because who was I was Ethan the chameleon. I was whatever anybody needed me to be. I was that because it hurt less.
Well,
I,
not only that, you know, you kind of didn't know who you were. You didn't get a chance to identify yourself. Nobody gave you that chance because they robbed you of that chance of growing into the human being that you're supposed to be.
you know,
And
the bit that shits me, sorry, I'm coming to a realization as you're talking about this because it's been in my mind for years now.
mm-hmm.
I've always, you know, because my mom was there. She didn't hurt me per se, but she didn't stop it. And she was in the house when it was happening a lot of the time. So I can't, you know, believe on my own that she just didn't know, but that's beside the point. But this idea, as you know, I'm talking to people now because this idea that as we go through this thing called life, we're supposed to, just because their family, feel pity for them doing the best that they could. But like the entire way, no matter how good she was doing or trying or whatever the fuck, it was always wrapped in my suffering. Like everything about the relationship between my mom and me, who wasn't my abuser, but might as well have been, is shrouded in the fact that I was still being abused. The love that I had for her out of two parents, one that was abusing me and the other one that wasn't stopping it, I'm going to pick the one that wasn't stopping it because I need the attachment to something, which is
Yeah.
also why I have such fucked up attachment issues now that I've had to learn to work through. Like my friends leaving the house is unsettling to me. And these are people with their own lives. Like this is the relationship being skewed by abuse. So like when people tell you that, well, they did their best, or, you know, they didn't hurt you, it's like, you're right. But I was hurt under their watch. And then because of that, the way that I deal with relationships now is really, really hard to stay positive. And that, like, the concept of that, like, still eats in me, because every time I hear somebody come forward and talk to me about what's going on with them, they always say, people keep telling me I should feel this way because it's my mom. But let me explain something to everybody listening to me. These people that are your parents, and this is why these generational traumas and shit keep happening, is because we think family means something by way of sweeping stuff under the rug. Don't air your dirty laundry out and keep it from being something that everybody knows about. But that's how it keeps happening. See, the deal is that they were just Debbie and Frank before you came along. Like, you are the gift that gave them the titles of mom and dad. It's not the other way around. You do not, in fact, owe them anything. They owe you from the moment you are conceived until you learn how to do it on your own. Love, care, attention, understanding, support. When that's amiss, family doesn't actually ever come into the equation. And we miss that as a society because we're born into something in this thing, and you have to feel this way and you should forgive, and but miss me with that. These people are only parents because of you. And that's not an egotistical way to think, that is factual.
It is. Our parents are a vehicle for us to come into the world. That's the basics. They're the portal for you to come into this world and have an experience as a human being. So in order to come in, you have to come in through, a human, or whether it's a family of mother and father, or just the mother, whatever it is. And when we go through these experiences, we depend on our parents or the family or whoever is raising us to raise us as children, because we depend on an adult, right? We can't go out and get a job. We're developing, and we depend on an adult to help us get through that stage. But once we grow out of that stage, we don't depend on them anymore. We don't have to stay connected with them if they're harmful in our own lives. So I think that's exactly what you're trying to tell everybody, is sometimes we get caught up in on the religion, the belief system, that society or wherever, everybody comes from different backgrounds, and different backgrounds have different belief systems. And some of them are really strong about the family unit, where you have to stick together no matter what. But it's really just a cultural thing that, we're conditioned to follow, but we don't have to follow those things if those conditions are very harmful to us. If it's not something that, is positive in our lives, we definitely don't have to be associated with it or stay connected with them. We have all the right to, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying stop letting the F word in family destroy your life. It's a word, and you make the word, not the other way around. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we get trapped in this idea that family is everything. And while it may be for most people, to this day, I still tell you, it's just a word. When you have a healthy, loving, caring, kind experience, family, yes, absolutely. But I also play like 18 different sports, one of them being football. And that's a closer thing to family, that as I understand what everybody else understands it as, than the one that I had. So why would I continue to let the one that I had destroy my life when I'm allowed to create a family?
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to, in the beginning when you said, I was just 5 years old and I didn't understand. I want people to understand as children, we're learning how to deal with them. We're learning everything about our environment, what our bodies are doing, what we're supposed to be doing, what's right, what's wrong, how to deal with our emotions. So as a young child, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, that child does not have the capacity to understand what's happening or process what's happening because they depend on the adults, right? They're still attached to the adults to help them survive and to teach them. So in a way, a lot of times the children at that age, they when they experience something like that, they don't have the rationale or the understanding that it's good or bad or what is it. It's once we start learning about more in depth about it, and this happened to me, it's when I became just slightly older and I started understanding about my body, that it all hit me all at once. And like, oh my God, now I understand what happened to me, because I didn't understand it while it was happening. I knew it, it wasn't good, but I didn't understand it.
Yeah, no, and for me, it was, being a survivor of Stockholm syndrome. I was groomed and conditioned to be this way. Like I said, it started with cuddling. What's wrong with cuddling? I cuddle
Right.
my daughter. We watch movies and cuddle on the couch all the time. But this, I can remember being more than just cuddling. Like it was all the time, constant, just never not. And then I just remember it escalated, but I didn't know the difference. How
Right.
was I supposed to know the difference? It was what I knew already.
Exactly.
And
Now I
it
gotta ask,
sucks. Yeah, shoot,
you
shoot.
have children of your own, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you educate her like early on? Like I know from my own daughter, early on, that was one of my biggest concerns. So I started teaching her about her body parts and what was appropriate, not appropriate, and telling her that she was in charge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She understands like autonomy of her body, and if she doesn't like somebody around her, she's allowed to say no, and she's allowed to punch them in the fucking throat if they keep persisting. Right? Like I have no time for not being heard. If someone says no to you, the next no comes with a fist wrapped around it. Right? Like you don't get 2, 3, 4, 5 times to. That's how people get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Stop the problem before it happens. That's my thing. And some people won't agree with me, and that's perfectly fine. You can do whatever you want with your children. I never want my daughter to come home and have a story for me about something that I could have showed her how to prevent.
Yeah, I totally understand because I've been through that, and I probably instructed my daughter to do the same, and she did and protected herself. But we become overprotective and we become more aware. And one of the things was like really making sure that she knew from a very early on age that she's in charge. She's in charge of her body, to the point then I was outcast. It's like, no, mommy, that's my job. You don't wash me, you don't help me clean myself. I got this. So then I knew, okay, she's got it. Like if she's not, even letting me help her, she's like, no, it's not okay. Then I knew she understood. And I started feeling, okay, I did what I needed to do for her to be safe, right? So she knows what to do or say or scream or whatever. And to some it may seem like, oh, that's a little extreme, like you said, but because we've lived through it, we don't want the same thing to happen to our kids or to anyone. So we're always extra precautious.
It's
And
not even extra. I don't agree. It's not even extra precautious. It's
you
just
think it
fact.
just it's
It's this is look, don't get it twisted. Anybody who says the world isn't fucked up is a clown. Look, like I'm in Canada. We're supposed to be a great nation of safety and peace and love and kindness and understanding. And that's never been, I've only lived here. It's never been my experience. I experience racism every day, every time I leave my house. Like, the world is ugly. And if you think that there's beauty in it, you're correct. But for there to be beauty in something, it then has to exist as the opposite. Like,
Yeah.
it's in what you
Yeah,
said.
it
There's
is.
beauty in it.
There's
So this is not extra. This is not. This is my daughter and my nephew, one and the same. They know how to protect themselves. They understand that, and they are given full permission to harm somebody, to stop and protect themselves if the words don't work. Period.
Yeah.
Because when words don't work and the other person switches to violence, these aren't really not going to be effective. And that's how this goes. Like, I have broken almost every bone in my body at least one time. I have stab wounds on my body. I understand what it's like to do the awfully white, turn the other cheek, or you don't have to engage. You can just turn around, except for the last time I turned around, I got hit with a bat and almost died. Like, it doesn't operate. It's a nice wishy-washy way to think that this is how the world works. But being able to defend yourself keeps you safe.
Yes, absolutely. You should.
That's not extra.
Yeah.
That's just fact.
Now, I want to know from you is, what was the breaking point where you finally got the help that you needed, and what kind of help did you end up, getting to help you get through all this stuff?
Yeah, having my daughter 5 years ago, I was an expecting parent, and I had no idea how to do it. There's no book on kids, but when you don't learn anything good from your family and growing up, you really have no book on it. I was with my partner at the time, and I was struggling, really dark, really still angry, still just didn't have any direction. Was in school. That's where me and my partner met, and we got pregnant. And the church that we were attending, we reached out to them, and they said that they would help us. So they went with their go-to therapist and bought a couple of sessions for me, or a handful of sessions, I should say, and set me up with Jay, my therapist. And that was the beginning of this whole thing. It took Jay 6 months to kind of get through to me. And when he did, this calling kind of just fell into my lap. Like, it was like I was ready. If I was able to open up to Jay, then I was ready to be opened up to what was next for me. And just kind of, fell into sharing my story. I didn't want to do it. I had a plan to end my life. And I started shaking one day, the week before, and picked up a pen because my heart said, write something down. And I wrote out my first story piece. And nothing was going to come of it. It was just this thing that I had to do. It was what I felt called to do in the moment. And, I heard the same voice that told me to write, tell me to share it. And I argued, I went back and forth with it, and I wasn't gonna. But then I reasoned with myself. I thought that, if I die tomorrow, or the next day here, and somebody sees this and they stay, then that's a 1-for-1 trade. Like, I can just die, and that's fair. So I shared it on Facebook, and just didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to see what people were going to say or make fun of me, or whatever I thought was going to happen. And I turned my phone on to say my goodbyes, and it's not what happened. People had been reaching out to me, thanking me for sharing my story. People were saying they were so sorry they didn't know this about me. People, were saying me too. It was just a wild outpouring of love. And every time after that I would start to shake, I would just write. I took that as the sign that, the universe was saying it's time to write something. And I kind of just kept going about that. Every time I thought I needed to go, every time I wanted to die, every time I got suicidal or whatever, I would start to write. And I kept finding more of my voice in the darkest part of me. And that was the trend. It started with writing blog pieces, and then a counseling center had seen some of my pieces, and they picked me to come speak at one of their events that they called Down with Man Up on toxic masculinity. And that was when I met my first MLA. We have, like, city government here, those people. and a guy that also does mental health for men, and he really liked what I had to say. And so I started shooting videos instead of writing, because he said that, social media you need more. My best friend and mentor agreed with him, and so we started shooting content. I called them mental health minutes, just tips that I learned from therapy at the time that would help me get, out of the darkness, or, ground myself, learning how to breathe properly, things like that. And then the counseling center picked up my videos and started using them with their clients. And it was every time I got uncomfortable, every time I would go dark, something beautiful would come out of it. And it just kept going. I started speaking more. People started coming to me. I started vetting, counseling centers and making sure that they actually had people that cared. I started to do work with the government and Alberta Health Services. And I still do a lot of this work today, and it just has always evolved. As the more uncomfortable I get, the more work I get to do, and I do it really well. And I found, and I have found and continue to find, a ton of beauty in the ugly. I find so much just just beauty in the suffering that I've gone through now. It's very peaceful, because every time I get dark, it's still messy from time to time, but something good. Oh, it's another piece. It's another level up in my story. It's someone I get to get my reach to go farther, because I remember something else about my story, or I learned something about myself. And I get to show people that it's possible. It's what I tell people. I'm in the business of showing people it's possible. And that's what I get to do every
That's
day.
beautiful. Do you find it that the outpouring of love is like something that you never imagined that you probably wouldn't have gotten even if you had a healthy family as a child? Like, it's almost like you're being compensated for everything, all that love that you should have gotten in a healthy way that is now being given to you in a different way.
I don't know if I noticed it as an exchange. I just know that when I stopped hating the world and chose to love, I got more. It's not, it's still not the exchange. I just know that people hate me so freely and so willfully without even knowing me. And so I choose to love in the same effect. And the more that I get to live my life through grace and love, and pouring it out into my community, the more, love I'm able to receive from people. It's not that they give more, it's that I understand how they're showing me that they love me more, or they support me more. My ability to receive love, because as receiving love is one of our biggest fucking need to relearn as trauma survivors. So the more of me that chooses to love and love my story and love the world for as ugly as it is, the more I'm able to receive more of that love for myself, because I understand it better and I understand me better.
That's beautiful. Now, Ethan, tell everybody, how they can reach you. Where can they find you nowadays? What are you up to now?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on most social medias at Fight Me On This. Instagram is Fight Me On This. TikTok, YouTube. Facebook is the only one that I still have as my personal training business at Pity the Fool Fitness. But what am I doing now? I'm working on getting this book published, hopefully in the next month here, and going to be speaking at a couple events, doing some traveling, working with some schools, working with some sports teams. Just trying to continue to blend mind, body, and spirit the way that I have for my clients, and get to do it for the world on a bigger scale.
Wonderful. And I'll have Ethan's links below our video. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Please make sure you subscribe so you get notified when these videos and podcasts gets released. Like and share. Please share these stories. It can save somebody's life. It can inspire someone. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Ethan. Until next week.
See you guys.